As a thirsty Federal Reserve sits down for their most anticipated two-day meeting in a number of years with the anticipation of raising rates tomorrow, we find them doing this probably holding their nose as consumer confidence is at its lowest level since 2011, gas prices all-time highs, geopolitical concerns off the charts, and mortgage rates for the first time in a long time flashing yellow for the housing market. Welcome back to This Week in Mortgage, everybody. My name is Sam Battaglia, your mortgage broker here at Guaranteed Rate in Beverly Hills, right on Cannon. I hope you're having a great week. So we received the consumer confidence reading last Friday. Not good. Lowest level since 2011. As we know, 2011 was one of the weirder times in the economic history of our country, coming off of the Great Recession and coming off of the first big modern-day printing press era for the Federal Reserve. The consumer is not as bummed out since then till today when they go look at what's going on out there. It looks like the geopolitical stuff is putting everybody in a bad mood, and then when everybody goes to get gas and food, it's putting their pocketbook into a bad mood. As we know, the U.S. consumer is about 70% of the U.S. economy. In my estimation, the U.S. economy is about 30% of the global economy. So, if the U.S. consumer sneezes, the rest of the world economy most likely will catch a cold. On to gas prices. I want to say the term car is derived from, I looked this up, a Latin term from the 1300s, which eventually turned into the term horseless carriage. And I think once they got rid of the horse, they also shortened the name to car from carriage. Now that said, people that are going to go buy cars in the next year, 2, 3, if gas prices stick at these levels, they're probably going to try to buy an electric car because the consumer rules the day. And consumer will win. The consumer never loses. If you're in demand, you win. If you're out of favor, you lose with the consumer. So I bet you people are going to start taking electric cars way more serious, as this could turn into a quote-unquote remember when conversation of either A, remember when we used to pay $6 a gallon for gas, or B, remember when we used to put gas in our cars, period. So, if these gas producers, as they said in Wall Street 2, which is actually an underrated movie, quote-unquote, you pigged out, kid. If these gas producers continue to pig out, the U.S. consumer will leave them, and they will actually have a big problem on their hands because the gasless car will now be the new talking point. Rather than the horseless carriage, we could have a gasless car, and they probably don't want that. I have an idea that can maybe help the consumer out in the short term and help these companies out in the longer term, even though I don't want to, but I'll take the short-term relief for the consumer. Why doesn't the government step in, since we know the majority of these oil price spikes and losses for that matter, the volatility is done by traders? Why doesn't the government step in and take some relief off the U.S. consumer and actually have the gas and oil companies, who it doesn't cost any more money to get it out of the ground yesterday as it did today, as it did last month, as it did last year. It's probably just getting cheaper every day for that matter. Why don't we have them subsidize our gas and oil for a little while right at the pump as a kind of thank you because the U.S. consumer will leave the oil companies and go buy gasless electric cars. So if they want to stay in business past the next 10 years, I suggest they start paying for our gas with us at the same time that we do. Now, the Federal Reserve, they are indeed going to be in the business of tough love this week. I believe, as I said, they're going to be holding their collective noses when they're going to be raising rates on an already squeezed consumer with an economy that is showing certain signs of a recession coming. And typically, they don't raise rates headed into a recession, but I believe, as I mentioned last week, they're in a pickle jar right now. Because at the beginning of the year, when they had their 7 rate hikes scouted out that almost all had greater than 70% certainty at that point, geopolitics was calm, Inflation was somewhat under control. It was only, well, not only, we hadn't seen it in the everyday food and energy. We only saw it on materials and goods that were maybe optional to buy, like baseball cards or purses or cars or something. We saw inflation there, but we didn't really get hit as the consumer till just recently with this food and energy inflation. And also a wildly volatile stock market could have the Fed second guessing whether or not they do a rate hike. So I'll tell you, they came in with 7. I don't know if they can go 7. And as crazy as this sounds, I don't know if they're going to raise rates tomorrow. The mortgage market has built in 7 rate hikes, which is going to lead us into our conversation about mortgage rates flashing yellow. But I don't believe the Federal Reserve has all their ducks in a row like they did a few months ago. So don't be surprised if they didn't raise rates tomorrow, I should say. We'll see. But I could make a base case argument for not raising rates, letting things chill out for a minute, and seeing where they sit. Because the last thing the Federal Reserve wants to do is squeeze the U.S. consumer, as the world economy will suffer because of that. And by the way, I do give the Federal Reserve a lot of credit. It's only for the last 20, 30 years that every single day geopolitical concerns are playing into their decision making. So they've got a lot of things to deal with. But if they took my advice, I wouldn't raise rates tomorrow. I would, hold off, give some maybe a little hawkish guidance to show that all the money you printed is working on inflation. But maybe just hold off, one more meeting to see where things shake with the consumer, with jobs, supply chain, geopolitical concerns. We will see. But I do know the odds are they are going to raise rates tomorrow, probably 25 basis points. And this will indeed right away affect home equity lines of credits, car loans, student loans, credit cards, and signature loans. Because as we know, the Federal Reserve mainly has 3 tools in their bag and on their playbook. Number 1, they usually cut rates to stimulate an economy. Number 2, they start buying bonds and securities. And when those 2 things don't work or they've been exhausted, they literally, as we know, just start printing money and essentially, for lack of better, dropping it out of a helicopter to let the U.S. consumer use that money. So we will see what the Federal Reserve does, but what they've done is they've led us into a place where mortgage rates are now embarking on that point of affordability that I keep saying is very important, where on a pre-approval that we wrote 3 or 4 months ago at roughly a percentage lower in interest rate, we have to recalculate and relook at everything now when our clients are making offers on their houses because the affordability is not the same. And this is another point of an already squeezed consumer getting squeezed a little harder. Now, I don't think this is going to affect home prices in the short term, but if it does indeed continue to rise, if we head towards the 5% level, somewhere in that ballpark, we will see housing slow down. Affordability isn't there, and if you look, what speeds housing markets up? Low interest rates. What's going to slow it down? High interest rates, especially interest rates that happen in the blink of a virtual eye. So that's the show for today. We're going to see what the Federal Reserve does tomorrow. If they didn't cut rates, I could make an argument for it, but I do understand why on the headline they do have to raise rates, because that proves out their theory that dropping money out of a helicopter indeed does reflate the economy. All right, everybody. I hope you have a great rest of the week. If you have any questions about your mortgage or real estate needs, please don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you so much.